outside. There's been some smoke in the ladies' restroom. And so let's just do that outside if you would, because other people have complained about it, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. We love you, but just please do your smoking outside if you would. That would be wonderful. We love you. David, how you doing over there? You ready to go? Hey, you know, I love music. Can you tell? I love to sing, because, you know, even the songs that we hear on the radio, they play them at a frequency that is not healthy for us. Did you know that? Even Christian music, they play it at a frequency that's not good. But I know when I sing that it brings in the holy angels, because it's a cappella, and I'm not opposed to having musical instruments or anything like that, but I know that when we sing and we glorify God, his holy angels join us, because they are so excited to see righteousness and people who love God in this wicked place that we live called earth. That's full of all kinds of darkness, right? We live on a dark planet, and you might be the only light that people ever see might be you and your spirit and the God that dwells with you and that shines forth from you. Can I sing for y'all real quick this morning while David's getting ready? Because, I mean, it's just like taking care of some business. There's a few songs. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my story. Tomorrow, David's going to give me an opportunity to talk to you about how to sue the unsuables. And that's not always popular when people find out that I know how to do that, and I'm amongst my civil servants. In my county, they all know me by name. You don't even have to say my last name. You just say the word Bonnie, and they go, because they know I know how to sue them in federal court and win. It's a beautiful thing. We have rights of redress when they transgress us. Did you know that? I'm going to teach you how to do that tomorrow. It's a beautiful thing. So before David gets going, I hope you can put up with my squeaky white girl voice. I wish I had a richer, deeper voice, but I've had to actually exercise my faith in dark places, including I've been in jail. Are you shocked? That's what happens when you know how to sue the unsuables. They like to retaliate sometimes and give you a hard time, but that's okay. It does not matter where I am. I will glorify God who made me, and I will bring light in even the darkest of places. Yes, I've been confined before for exercising my God-given rights. I know, no injured party, no transgressing anyone, but it's about tapping that trust, right? So they can make stuff up and then tap your trust. It keeps government going and funded. It's crazy how that works, but that's our system, right? Until we change it, which we're doing. So there's a song that I sang in the county jail when I was confined for 30 days for living peacefully in my home when a judge wrote an order telling me to leave. It was not a foreclosure issue, but a judge wrote an order without a hearing, without an invitation, telling me to leave my house. And I'm like, hello, I don't have to obey that void order. So I kept living there. And I wound up having to pay a price of 30 days of confinement. But that's okay. I'm going to wind up making $15 million off of that. It's a beautiful thing. They're going to pay me richly for, you know, infringing on my God-given liberty. And I already have that bill on the table, and they're going to pay me. It's a beautiful thing. But one of the songs that I sang while confined that it just lights my heart light, and all my inmates, I was confined with 7 other ladies. Many of them had drug and alcohol dependency issues. But I ask them daily, can I pray over you? Do you mind if I sing tonight before the lights go out? Because we just want to praise God while we're in this dark place. And I won favor with my inmates, and they allowed me to pray over them and their children. And all of a sudden, there was so much peace and harmony in our cell that all the other pods of ladies wanted to be in our cell and leave their cell where there was fighting and strife, and they wanted to be, because during rec time, when we were in a big gym, all the ladies got to talk, and they're like, yeah, we don't fight. There's nothing but peace and harmony in our cell. That's the value of praising God and praying. The holy angels come into wherever you are, and you can be that bright light shining in this dark world for God. You hear me? It's a beautiful thing. This fanny pack is heavy. Hold on, let me take it off. I'm going to sing real quick. They're going to let me. It's great. They're going to love it, baby. I know. And I'm not saying it sounds good, but you know what? The Bible says to make a joyful noise. We do? Oh, wow. She can go next. She can go next. She might not know this song. Yeah, we need to do that. We need to put her on the spot. How does the song go that I love so much? I talked about it so much. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet, while God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Wait, it gets better. As a lily of the valley, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free, while God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. We want people free. Christ set us free on the cross. We live every day of our life to set people free. And if you get that fire in your heart, you need to stand up in your nation state and do the same thing, because God is behind you and he will bless you every step of the way, because this is his movement. This is not about David and I. This is about God and you being free from slavery, which God wants all of us free. We love you. Let's pray, shall we? Now that the heavenly angels are all in here with us, we just worship God. We praise him. Heavenly Father, we love you so much. We thank you for this day. We thank you for how much you love us. We thank you for setting us free when you did that so long ago on the cross, when you shed your blood for us, when you suffered, when you wore a crown of thorns, when you hung on that cross naked, when you were exposing every bit of the criminal prosecution and how dirty and destructive it is, that an innocent living man that you are, Lord, hung and died on the cross. There is nothing more offensive to you, I'm sure, than a sham trial at midnight, a sham trial at dark when there was no facts in evidence of any criminal activity, and yet you paid the price for all of us when you hung on that cross, and we're so grateful, Lord, because all of us are sinners. We're weak. We have shortcomings. Dear Lord, we have lived a life full of sin. We were born into sin, but we want to live our life to please and honor you. Please bless us, strengthen us, encourage us. I pray, dear Lord, that you bind the demons that are assigned to us, that you cast them out in Yeshua's name. Dear Lord, station your angels around us and fill us with your Holy Spirit, that we may glorify you every day of our life, that we would see you face to face when you come in your clouds of glory. I pray for strength over David today, that you bless his feet, his legs, his back, his neck, his shoulders, his mind, his mouth. Speak through him, dear Lord, as your servant, willing to do your bidding. Dear Lord, use him in a mighty way, not for any glory for David, but to glorify you and praise you. We honor you, we worship you, and we thank you in advance for the miracles that you're working in these people's lives. Bless them coming in, going. Bless them in the city, bless them in the country, bless them in their kneading bowl, in their fields, in the fruit of their land, the fruit of their womb. Bless them in every way. Your will be done, Lord. Your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.
Good morning. Everybody get sleep? Some. Yeah, I got a little too. What a beautiful place we live in. I love this country. Every minute I'm alive and standing upright and vertical and looking across this land, I just feel joy, God's work. And I see I close my eyes and I see all the corruption in it, and all of our people and our prisons. I visit a lot of people in prison. I know what they're going through. I know how hard it is. I know what it takes to get them out. And I know, as you know, I've read and I've studied the law for as long as I have, and I've read studies by our prominent law schools. Got a really good study in my book from Yale about how many prisoners we have in prison. And I want to talk a little bit about that this morning. I felt a little compelled because one person poured their heart out to me this morning. And I'm going to give you an example. I've been all over this world. I've been to China 5 times, different places all over China. Been from one side to the other, from north to south, from east to west. I've ridden in cars across their freeways and on their high-speed trains, and I've met a lot of people over there. And I learned something because I was 50 years old when I went to China for the very first time. I learned that I had 50 years of misconceptions about China because of what our papers and our news agencies and our television channels and our schools have drummed into me my whole life. And I looked at China a lot differently before I went there than I look at them now. The Chinese Communist Party that you all hear about is really a small percentage of the population of China. It's approximately 1 million people in government and approximately 1 million additional people in their military that fight for the government. The government over there, they all drive black Audis. That's their car of choice. Our federal government kind of likes black Suburbans. They drive black Audis. And so the Chinese people know when they're around, because the Chinese people refuse to buy a black Audi so that they can tell the difference. And they can see them coming. And when they see them coming, they just turn and go the other way and they mind their own business. And the people pay the Chinese Communist Party quite a bit of money. And that gives them a lifestyle where they're happy. They go to Macau and they gamble. They eat at fancy restaurants. They spend their time with their friends, and they leave the people, for the most part, alone. Okay? Of all the miles I put on the highways in China, I never saw a police officer, ever. Hardly ever saw them in town in any sort of a vehicle. In fact, I cannot remember one single time where I saw a police officer in a vehicle in China, other than golf carts in the train stations, because the train stations are so big. They can't walk from one side of the train station to the other in a reasonable amount of time, so they take golf carts around. The police do. I never saw a police officer wearing a duty belt or a weapon. Not once. I've seen police officers in cities of 14 million people standing on a corner. I watched one help an old lady across the street. If there's a tourist anywhere around, they're talking to them, they're taking pictures with them, and they're treating them like movie stars. I was treated like a movie star when I was over there. And I talked to several of the police officers while I was there. I had a lot of fun doing it. And I talked to them about the prison system. And China only puts people that hurt other people in prison. And there's not much of that. And I'd go to lunch, and they'd be 2-hour lunches. And I'd go to lunch with groups of engineers, and they'd be driving $90,000 cars that they pay a $10,000 tax on to buy one new. Every car over there is taxed $10,000 by the government on top of the price of the car. And they lived in $1 million apartments in town. And they make good money. And what my conception was is everybody over there was poor and they worked cheap. And that's not true. That's not true. Most of the people I talked to over there made a pretty decent living. In fact, I can walk into most towns in Texas and talk to people, and they make less than the people in China. That's a misconception that we had as Americans. And I see how they do things. Now, there are poor areas, don't get me wrong, there are. I'm not going to discount that. But most of those poor areas are in eastern China, not in western China. I mean, they're in western China, not in eastern China, where most of the people live, okay? And in eastern China, that's where most of the big cities are. And I was talking to a few people, including 2 attorneys over there. That was interesting. And I had 2 attorneys, I had 4 engineers, and I had 2 police officers that we went to dinner with. And boy, do they stay out late. Man, I had to get up early, and they kept me out until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And they drink way too much over there. And it seems like nobody gets drunk, but they consume a tremendous amount of alcohol. But they don't get drunk. And I figured out why. They serve watermelon and peanuts with their alcohol. and that counteracts the alcohol, and they don't get drunk. But anyway, in talking to this small group at dinner time, we started talking about customs, in going to dinner and to these lunches. I talked to them about custom, and I remember the very first time we went to lunch, right when I got off the plane, got there. We went to lunch. They picked me up at my hotel. We show up at this restaurant, and it was hot. It was Nanjing, and they rolled the windows down. It was hot, and they pull up in the parking lot to the sidewalk that was about from me to the third row wide. That's how wide the sidewalk was. And I'm telling you, tens of thousands of people were walking by. They're 15, 16 wide as they're walking. Very busy place. And they leave their windows down in their car. And they've got $2,500 Apple computers. They got expensive Nikon cameras. They've got cell phones. And they're just leaving them on the seats in their car. And they always put me in the limo position. And they all get out and they start walking in this restaurant, and I get out and I go, hey, wait a minute, aren't you going to roll up the windows? Because I had a bag with a computer and stuff there too, right? We weren't going to take them in the restaurant. And I said, aren't you going to roll up the windows? And they say, why? And I said, well, you got a bunch of expensive stuff in here. Aren't you afraid somebody's going to steal it? There's 10,000 people walking past the car. And we're right next to the sidewalk. Wouldn't take anything for somebody to step off the sidewalk, reach their hand in the car and step back on the sidewalk. Walk off with a $3,000 computer. And they said, oh, no, don't worry about that. No Chinaman would ever reach their hand in that car and take something. I said, what do you mean? I've been in big cities in America. You just don't do that. And they said, because you see all those people? If one Chinaman reached their hand in that car, 25 of them tackle him, beat him up, hold him for the police. Call the police on him. They'd take him away. He'd be punished severely. I said, does that happen often? Never happen. I said, never happen. Chinese people don't do that. We respect each other. We got to talking. They don't believe their old people should ever die in a hospital, or there's no such thing as old folks' homes over there. That would be a sin. They don't put their parents in old folks' homes. They believe they should die at home in a comfortable bed, surrounded by their children, their grandchildren. They look at it as a sin if they die alone. Their children are so watched over and so well taken care of and so sweet and respectful. Those little children come running up to an American stranger, a man 6 foot tall. I mean, they're all this big. You know, I'm looking over the top of 1,000 people. And these little kids come running up and surround you. Parents, they keep an eye on them, but they let them do it. Because I think if a child was harmed over there, somebody'd be dead really quick. Really quick. They're not going to put up with anything like that. And so I got this dinner when I had the attorneys and the police officers there. I started talking to them about China and the jails and how I've heard that they just round people up and they put them in the jails, and there must be millions of people in hundreds of millions of people in these jails over there because there's a lot of people in China. There's 2 billion people in China. I want you to look at this. 2 billion. We have roughly 330 million, and I think the population's going down. Okay, that is 1/6 the population of China. 1/6. We're approaching 3 million people in prison. Now, this was a few years back, these numbers, but China had 500,000 in prison. One-sixth less. Now you tell me which is the freer country. See, they don't have our bond program. This is what our newspapers, our television stations, and things should be reporting on, is exactly what I talked to you about yesterday. A police officer creates a cause of action. That cause creates a case number. That case creates a CUSIP, which is attached to a bond, which is sold under their ISIN number out the back door of the courthouse to a broker on Wall Street. And those are reported in the CAFR funds, the Certified Annual Financial Reports. And that's that double set of books, the off-book money that every county operates on. And if you don't believe me, whatever county you live in, do your homework. You find out the entire county's budget of where they're spending money. See what their parks and rec budget is. See what their police forces budgets are. See what their county services budgets are, and the cities that are in the counties as well, and add it all up. And then divide it by the number of people in the county. And you tell me if that's coming from taxes. It's not. It's not. I proved this on the civil side, and I proved how they get paid on the criminal side in federal court. And I'll tell you what the federal courts did. When the case was all over with, they sealed the case. They gathered up all the documentation and handed it to me and said, "Here, take it with you. Get out." And they do that because they don't want some lawyer graduated from Yale to find out how it's all running and how it works and how we can use it to win cases and use it to remove the corruption. And you've got to, I want you to know, because the only way we can be free is to stop the corruption. The only way we can stop the corruption is to be peaceful. We fly the peace flag. We're peaceful and we use a pen. and we go into the courts and we make a difference. And we hold those public servants accountable. Now, how many people in this room who raised their hand yesterday who has had some kind of a problem with where they had to go to court felt that they hadn't committed a crime, that they hadn't injured another party, there was no corpus delicti? Yeah, the hands are starting to go up. Raise your hands. That, for a small group of people, a couple hundred people, what are we at, about 240? So, for a small group of people to have that large of a percentage, the government has, for lack of a better term, accosted without a victim, without a crime being committed, without, how many of those people that raised their hands had either been put in jail unnecessarily or had what they would think, hands are going up already, I haven't even asked you to raise your hand yet, and who or felt that they had an exceptionally large, unreasonable fine. Okay. All right, we're already way above the percentage difference between America and China, just in the room, just in the room. How many people have had a problem with Child Protective Services of either them or their immediate family in the room? Okay. I've been traveling around this nation since 1989, doing seminars almost every weekend, teaching people. I started off mainly where everyone in the class were parents of people who had children that had been taken. Out of all the people who just raised their hands who had problems with CPS, how many of those people did the police or CPS show up together with an actual warrant issued in the proper form with a proper judge? Raise your hand. Not one. See, that hurts my heart. I've studied religion and history for 50 years. I've studied the law for 35. I've been helping people for more than 35 years. I've helped tens of thousands of people. Bobby made me cry telling me stories this morning back there about people who have come up to him in his seminars, telling stories about me and how I've helped them in the past. And those are very humbling things to me, and they just bring tears to my eyes, and they're hard to tell. But I've been dealing with this long because that's how I got into this. I'd gone through a divorce in December of 1988, and in July of 1989, while I was at work running a business, I owned my own home, free and clear at the time. I had over 100 salespeople alone working for me. I had 6 attorneys working for me under my business, not some law firm. They had my business cards that they were carrying. And they were working for me out of my office, a financial planning office, where we did mortgages and securities and insurance products and trusts. and they worked for me. And here's this young kid who had had 6 children in 8 years.
Wasn't all that bad at the beginning, right?
And I had 6 children under the age of 8, where the baby was 6 months old. I had babysitters watching them while I was at work. And I came home from work one Friday, and there was a note on my kitchen counter. Now, I had this door that went between my kitchen and the garage. And there was a deadbolt on that door, and there was a sign on that door that said, "Do not allow the children into the garage." What do you have in a garage? I had tools and lawnmowers. I had a Shelby Mustang I didn't want the kids to touch. It was nice. So GT 350, very nice Mustang. Didn't want the kids touching it. I had lawnmowers and power tools and hedge trimmers and gasoline and stuff to keep the yard and all kinds of things in there I didn't want them to touch. Chainsaws. Okay. And the babysitter had left that door unlocked or open, because also in that older house that I lived in, the washer and dryer was in the garage. You had to go down the garage and walk down a couple steps, and there was a little laundry room in the back. And that's where the washer and dryer is. So she had done a load of laundry, and then she'd went into another part of the house, and she left that door open. And my 18-year-old son went into the garage, and there was a little 1-gallon gas can with pre-mixed chainsaw oil and gas mix, and he spilt it, and he probably got his hands in it and touched his face with it. And she smelled gas on his face, loaded him all up in the car, and ran him across town to the hospital. I get home, all I find is this note: "We're at the hospital." So I drive as quickly as possible, probably breaking every speed limit. I absolutely was, to get to the hospital as fast as I could. And I walk in and I start inquiring with the lady at the desk right after you walk through the door. And I started talking to her and trying to find out where my kids were. And I noticed she was glancing over my shoulder. So I turn, and there's 2 police officers standing over by the glass. So I walked up to them and I said, "Hey, I need your help. I'm trying to find my children right now. I don't know where they are, but I know they were brought here, and she is not being very helpful. Will you help me?" And as I'm doing that, and I'm talking to the police officers, and I'm looking out the front of the hospital, that hospital was all glass. As I'm looking past them, I see my kids way down there climbing into a white van. Some guy put them into this van. So I kind of push off the officers a little bit, run out the door, start running through the parking lot, and the van was driving away. As a single dad with 6 kids that was left with the children as his responsibility, that was probably the most difficult time of my life. Nothing else, and I've been through some stuff. Nothing else comes close. Nothing. I felt that heart wrench And I went to the sheriff's department and I said, hey, somebody took my kids. I don't know who they are. Now, I had an idea that it was probably, at that time, it was called DHS, Department of Human Services in Oregon. But I didn't know. I hadn't talked to anybody. The hospital didn't tell me a thing. I just had an idea who it was. But I went to the sheriff and I said, I didn't know who it was for sure. I need some help. Can we find out? Now, this is a Friday night. It's like probably 7:30 at night. And he says, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Why don't you check with DHS on Monday morning? Right? Like I'm going to wait till Monday morning. My kids were just taken. I'm going to find out where they are. And that was the worst night of my life because I didn't know where they were. I drove all over town. I drove by DHS. I had no idea where to even begin to look. I was young. I hadn't been around this kind of stuff at all, ever. Never been in trouble with the law before, ever. Never, didn't before that time. And I had no idea where they were, and I couldn't find them. And that town was a town of about 250,000 people at the time. Fairly big. A capital city. And Saturday morning, bright and early, I'm at the sheriff's office. Can't we file kidnapping charges? I mean, can't we file some kind of report? I want to know where my kids are, and I want to know by the end of the day. This is it. I'm not going through one more night like I just had, because I didn't sleep a wink that night. Not a bit. I cried all night. And he wasn't much help. He said, you're probably going to have to wait till Monday morning. Not me. I drove over to DHS again. And I'm peeking through the glass door down this long hallway, and I see somebody way on the other side of the building. The building was bigger than this. And I see somebody way down the hallway. So I just start knocking on the door. And I knocked on the door until I was leaving blood marks on the door from my knuckles bleeding. I just knocked on the door. And I'm bound and determined to get their attention. I think they were cleaning the building. I don't know. Finally, they come down, they open the door. What can I do for you? I said, I need to know where my kids are. I'm looking for my kids. They go, do you know DHS has them? I said, no, I don't know. They were taken at the hospital by a white van. Somebody in a white van, a man in a white van is I think what I said. And the lady says, well, I can't help you. I can't help you. I don't have any information. You haven't been contacted by anybody? No, not a phone call, not somebody driving by my house leaving a business card. Nobody at the hospital gave me anything. I'd even been back to the hospital and tried to find out more information. Nothing. The hospital, they wouldn't say a thing to me. And that just pissed me off, I'm telling you. They wouldn't say anything to me. I'd done nothing wrong. I was making good money. I had a large financial planning company and I rented the entire second floor of a huge office building on Cruz Way in Lake Oswego, Oregon, one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in the state. It's known as the Wall Street of the West, all financial center. We sold $160 million of securities in my first 6 months in business there. We were doing well. I wasn't poor. We had food. We had nice things, nice cars. The house was paid for. I paid cash. In fact, I had 5 rental homes. I'd served this nation. You probably couldn't find 10 other people in that entire town that had as much credibility as I had, who knew as many prominent people as I did. And they took my kids. I went back from there, left DHS, went back to the sheriff's office, and I said, I was just at DHS, and they didn't know where my children are. He goes, they didn't? Okay, that changes things. He says, I'll take a report. I said, great. He takes some information down from me and writes stuff down on paper for about 30 minutes. And I said, well, where are we going to go look first? It's like I'm riding around in your car. Okay, we're going to go find my kid. Of course, that ain't going to happen. He was kind of lazy, in my opinion. Didn't take it as seriously as I did. I think he knew more than I knew. But he handed me this little white business card. And this white business card was pretty plain. It just had this guy's name on it, a phone number, and it said retired under his name. That was it. He handed it to me and said, this guy helps people just like you. Give him a call. So I leave, I go to a phone. Now we have them in our pockets, but we didn't then. I had to use a landline. You remember what those were? Anyway, and I went to a phone and I called the number on there, and the man I called said, give me your address. I'm going to come down and help you. And I gave him my address. And this man became my mentor. He was retired after 23 years as a federal prosecutor out of Portland, Oregon. And he knew the corruption in the whole court system, especially the family courts. And he knew. And he came down there and he spent all the rest of the Saturday evening and all day Sunday with me. And he taught me what to do on Monday morning. And on Monday morning, I dressed in nice clothes and I had a stack of papers about as thick as these travel by right binders. And I had a stack of papers, and he says, show up early. Before they open the doors, go to the courthouse. This particular courthouse had 4 courtrooms. As you walk in the door through security, they had and they didn't have much for security back then either, just one guy, no machines, no metal detectors, none of the crap you see today. And they had the row of glass windows where the court clerks are. And they had this long hallway. And the courtrooms, they had 4 courtrooms, 2 on each side of the hallway that were offset from each other because of the court clerks area. They offset the courtrooms. And across the hallway from the courtrooms is a bench. in front of the door of the courtroom. So if this was the door, there'd be a bench here. And he says, sit down on that bench after they open. He says, people are going to be coming in. Look like you know what you're doing, like you're there for a reason, like you're there with a purpose, and just stare at your papers. I don't care what they say. Now remember, I didn't even have a court case. I had nothing. I had no contact from DHS yet. Now when I got home from there, I had a business card on my door. But I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. First thing in the morning on Monday, they had gone by my house. I had already left. I'm sitting there on the front steps of the courthouse, waiting for them to open. They open, I go in and I sit on that bench. And my mentor says, people are going to be coming in and they're going to be filling these courtrooms. Every day, all 4 of these courtrooms are having something go on all day long. He said, sit down on that bench, pretend like you know what you're doing, let the courtroom fill up, and watch through the little glass window in the door. And you'll see when they start their proceed. And the judge will say, all right, or the bailiff will say, all rise, and the judge will walk in and he'll sit down. My mentor said, as soon as you see the judge sit down, get up, muster all your strength. Do not show fear and do not be nervous. Well, I had a little bit of a background before that of not showing fear. Okay. So, walk in, throw the doors open like you own the place, walk over, open the bar, and walk up to the judge when you're right in front of him. And here's what I want you to say. Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt everything, but I need your help. It's an emergency. Will you take your lunch hour to hear what I have to say? And that's what I was supposed to say, and I was supposed to do it with strength and with confidence and like it's incredibly important. Now remember, I was 26. That's pretty young to do that. I'd never been in a courtroom before, ever. He showed me, my mentor showed me what courtrooms look like before I got there. And the judge said, I see that it's important. Yes, I'll hear what you had to say at lunch. And he started to tell me to get out of his courtroom. And I said, Your Honor, I need one favor. And I'll never forget the look on his face, ever forget the look on his face. He looked at me like, kid, I just did you a favor. That's exactly how he looked at me. And I said, I need one favor. I need you to scribble something down that I can take the sheriff and have him get the guy here that I need here at lunch. And I said, he's a government employee. I'm sure he'll come. And the judge scribbles something down on a piece of paper. He hands it to me and says, take it down to the court clerk and she'll type it up all formal like. That's exactly what he said. All formal like. You know, that's not even proper English. And I took it down to the court clerk's office. She typed it up. She even put his name on it. And I ran it over to the sheriff. The sheriff went over to DHS, got the DHS worker, and we showed right back up at noon. And we walked into that courtroom and it was empty, except the judge was sitting up there waiting. And we walked right in, walked right up to the judge, and as we're walking up to him, he motions to us and he gets up and he starts walking towards this door. And we walk off the side of the courtroom through this door, and he takes us back into his chambers, and he's getting his sandwich out and a drink he ordered in. And he sits down at his desk, and he's opening his sandwich, and he takes a couple of bites, and it's me, the sheriff, and the DHS worker standing in front of the judge's desk. Just like that. And he looks over at me and he says, well, son, this is your court. You called this. Yeah, it's my court. He goes, what is the situation? So I told him the whole story. Exactly what happened. He looks at the sheriff and he says, is that what you know to be true? And the sheriff says, yep, that's exactly what happened. Now remember, I didn't even have a court case. Not one piece of paper from DHS yet. Not a hearing appointment. Nothing yet. And then he asks the DHS worker, is there anything to add to that? Tell me if you know it the same way. And the DHS worker looks at the judge and says, yes, that's what happened. And the judge takes a couple more bites of his sandwich. And that's when I started to shake. And I started to get real nervous inside, and I could feel my legs getting weak. And I thought, that's as far as my mentor told me what to do. I'm 26. I've never been in a courtroom before. I've never looked at a judge in the eyes before. I've never been this close, because we were this close. And he didn't tell me what to do after that, or what to say. And this judge is eating his sandwich, and he's not saying anything. And the time is moving on. And that 10 or 15 seconds, maybe 30, felt like 30 minutes. It did. It just felt like all the time in the world. Like so many things are going through my head. And he says, kid, what would you like to have happen here? Well, I didn't know what to say from there. So I said the first thing that came to my head, I want my kids back at my home by 5 o'clock, and I want him fired. That's what I said. And the judge looks over at the DHS worker, and I'm standing there just looking at the judge. And I got pretty good peripheral vision, and I'm pretty sure the DHS worker nodded his head and smiled at the judge. I wasn't looking right at him, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And the judge looks at the DHS worker and he says, have his kids back to him by 4 o'clock and have your resignation on my desk by 5. Well, let me tell you something. I've always loved police officers. I have many of them that are friends. I've built sheriff's buildings. I've built city police buildings. I built houses for them. I built barns for them. I had a pretty good construction company that I inherited from my dad. He was a builder and a farmer. And he farmed in the summer and built houses all winter. And I took that over. And I knew a lot of those guys. I'd served on the sheriff's posse. I was a volunteer for the Deschutes County Sheriff's Department. Over the years later, but I felt bad at that time. I've respected law enforcement very much back then. I grew up that way. patriotic family. My family has served in every war this country's ever had prior to Vietnam. My brother was in Vietnam. He was older than me. And I felt very, very guilty all night. So I went through my fourth night with very little sleep, and I felt so guilty that I actually called the DHS worker on Tuesday morning to apologize for making him lose his job. And I'll never forget what he told me, ever. He says, "Kid, you did me a favor." He says, "I've been kidnapping children from parents for 22 years, and I was ready to retire. I was ready to retire." And he and I stayed friends for about 4 years after that. And then he moved. I lost track. And life got busy, as it always does. And that's how I got started in all this. So I went back to my office and I told my secretary, "I want you to run a quarter-page ad in the newspaper in the Portland Oregonian, which has a reach of about 1 million people. And I said, I want you to run a quarter-page ad, and I wanted you to put in there that any parents who've had any problem with Child Protective Services or DHS, call this number. And I want you to add a phone line to our office. You're going to answer the phone. You're going to set up appointments for Saturdays at the library." And I'd already gone to the library and arranged a room every Saturday. Every Saturday, I arranged a room. Never expecting so many families to show up. And I kept thinking to myself, man, if they could do this to me. A farm boy from a mill town, coming from a patriotic family, a family that had served this country, and a prominent business person, owning my own home free and clear at 26, owning 5 rentals, having my own business, having more than 100 people work for me. If they can do this to me, who else are they doing it to? Who else? And I started helping families, started helping parents. And that just grew and grew and grew till I was putting on seminars, mainly for Child Protective Services parents. And then the more I learned, the more I studied, the more I understood, the more I said, there's not a man, woman, and child, whether they've had kids taken or not in this nation, that doesn't need to learn the information that I've learned. And I sold my business within 6 months of that time. Now, I always had a little ranch, always had a little farm, always had a few things going, but I had to sell that big financial planning company and move my children out of those schools and get them into a small town. So I moved from Salem, where I was living and working in Lake Oswego. I'd moved to Lake Oswego for a little while I had my business up for sale. And then I bought a house in Sisters, Oregon. Anybody been to Sisters? I used to ride my horse into town. Yeah. And I moved my kids to a small town and then eventually moved to Bend. and lived in Central Oregon up until September of last year. And then I moved to Texas. Now I'm a proud Texian. But in helping all those families, going to courts with them, doing all the research and all the studying and hitting the law books and reading everything I could possibly read for years and helping them, I learned a lot. And that's the knowledge I've been sharing with you guys. And how we can change this country is to learn this knowledge and change our status, our standing, and our jurisdiction. Understand how the counties and cities get paid on their off-book money. If this circle represented the United States federal budget for the year, that is taxes and tariffs. That little piece of that pie is taxes and tariffs. Now, how do I know that? Because I researched about 6 years ago, before I stood in front of the 9th District Court in Portland, Oregon, in front of Judge Mosman. I researched how they got paid. And the Department of Fiscal Services, I got all of their financial statements through FOIA. Hundreds of pages. And in hundreds of pages, there were very few that showed this. And a lot of pages that showed this. And all of that came from the Department of Justice. And the Department of Fiscal Services will tell you that the Department of Justice is the largest contributor to the federal budget by far. And that's their words. By far. This is what the people see. And then you see Nancy Pelosi giving away $16 trillion this year in various things. And you watch our debt clock. And we're told we're all in debt, and that makes us feel personally responsible because we are the full faith and credit of the United States government. And that's what they tell you, and that's what they lead you to believe. And then I learned that my town, my county that I lived in Oregon, had a Parks and Rec budget of $65 million. I learned that the city police had a $180 million budget, and the county sheriff's department had a $230 million budget, and on and on and on. And I started adding it all up. And I added up one thing after another, after another, after another. And I said, how many people live in this county? Google. And there's about 250,000. 100,000 of them live in the city of Bend, biggest city in the county. Everything else is small towns. And out of that 250,000 people, I know I have a calculator. I have a degree in business with a major in economics. And I added it all up. That's just one of my 5 useless degrees. And I started adding it all up. And I said, every man, woman, and child is paying more than $50,000 in taxes. Bullshit. No, they're not. These numbers don't work. My dad always said, follow the money. So I started figuring it out. And David Doyle was our county attorney. And I like Dave. I've been in his office many times. I had a lot of fun with Dave, and now he's trained his son, who just passed the bar a year ago, to take over for him. The son's going to be the new county attorney. I think that's pretty interesting. Keep it in the family. But anyway, I talked to Dave and I says, Dave, I just learned something. I want to show you, and you're going to confirm if it's true or not, aren't you, Dave? You're not going to lie to me, right? You're going to tell me the truth. I'm going to look you in the eye, and I'll know whether you're lying or not. I said, I just learned about this thing called Certified Annual Financial Reports. What do you know about them? Dave hung his head. And I said, here's a FOIA request so we can make it formal. I want a copy of them. And I learned that little county had billions of dollars in bond funds they're not telling anybody about. Billions. So I said, Al Frederick, he's the county attorney in Jefferson County, the next county up. We're going to go talk. So I did the same thing I did with Dave Doyle. And I checked him out. And I gave him a FOIA request. Now that county's a heck of a lot bigger in farmland and irrigation and cows than it is in people. Their biggest town's Madras, which has maybe 2,500 people. That's their biggest town. And I found out that they had billions in that double set of books they keep. Started asking around who's in control of the money. Who's in control of it? Takes 2 signatures. It took the treasurer of the county and the court administrator. The court administrator to access the funds. The Department of Fiscal Services reported to me back when that case was going on that they collect from the Department of Justice, from our federal courts throughout the country, the biggest banks you'll ever see in your life is a federal courthouse. That's the biggest bank. The biggest bank in your town is the county courthouse. That's the biggest bank. It's a lot bigger than Wells Fargo, B of A. And the federal banks around the country collect $1 trillion a day in bond money. And that's according to the Department of Fiscal Services. That's more money in 1 month than our debt clock has on it. They could pay that thing off tomorrow just by cashing in a few bonds. The municipal bond funds, the prison bond funds that are out there on Wall Street in the bond market, which is 10,000 times larger than the stock market, is a tremendous amount of money. I read some of them off to you, whose individual people like yourself, it's their court cases that the CUSIPs came off of. And I read those case numbers yesterday. I read you the case numbers, I read you the CUSIPs, I told you what the ticker symbols were. I told you what the name of the bond fund was and how much was in the fund. I can tell you the inception date, and I can tell you the date we pulled it. Just off those little papers, which I pay a securities broker to get for me. They're coming from a third party, not from me. I pay a securities broker to look up court cases and find the CUSIPs and tell me what funds those CUSIPs are investing in. And I pay them $125 to look one of those court cases up. And I don't know how many we order. Bonnie and I probably order 10 a week. Just on Rodney Brown's alone, he had 9 court case numbers. 9. And we looked them all up. And you heard the values that I read off. Every one of them was in the $100 million or more. Some over $1 billion. One was over $10 billion. Now understand, that's not just one case number. That's bundled cases. Everybody's for the day gets bundled and put into certain funds. And that broker will buy into one fund in one day and another fund the next day and another fund the next day. And every day he picks them up at the courthouse. Some guy from Bear Stearns. When you learn that that money is there, and then you drive down the county roads where I live in Texas, and they wear out shock absorbers in a year because they're not maintained. You got the worst roads in some of these county roads in Texas I've ever seen. Oregon, our gravel roads are smoother. I'm telling you. Our gravel roads in Oregon are smoother. Our paved roads are like this floor. They're just perfect. There's very few bad roads in Oregon. They really put the people's money that they spend at the pump back into their roads. Here, I think it builds judges' houses. It's got to be going somewhere. The state roads are good. It's the county roads that suck, and only in some counties. So you know which is the crooked county and which one's the good county. So you start researching this and you're going to find out. So now I'm going to talk to you about the criminal side. This was all civil. We talked about it being civil. I'm trying to finish up from yesterday. The criminal side also has the same civil side. Exactly the same. Then they have the criminal side. Now, the criminal side is interesting. What is an indictment? At the bottom of every indictment, you're going to see the words a true bill. It's an invoice. It carries a penal sum. That penal sum is determined by what crime was committed. One federal felony count of fraud, and the reason they don't put the numbers on the invoice, is $2 million. One federal felony count of fraud in federal court is $2 million. The judges get a net retention. That's a creative word. I call that a commission. A net retention of $95,000. The federal judge gets. The prosecutor gets $50,000. You come along and you pay your defense attorney $25,000 to defend you. That's what you pay. And you hire an attorney and you give him a $25,000 deposit. That's what he takes to defend you in federal court. Bare minimum. A federal court-approved attorney is $450 an hour, even if he just says, hey, I thought about you today. I spent 1 hour thinking about your case today. I took $450 off your $25,000 deposit today because I thought about you. Wait till they start making phone calls. Anyway, you pay them $25,000. And I'm going to tell you what happens. Because a federal prosecutor for 23 years, my mentor, who I was friends with until the day he died last year, I was friends with him from 1989. The last 2 years of his life, he had Alzheimer's. And he told me the same story every day that I talked to him. Every time I talked to him, he told me the same story. And I listened because I respected him so much. He taught me so much over the years. He told me that these three are all bar members, that they're all in the same labor union, that they work for the same company, the British Accreditation Registry, that they get together and play golf, and they go out to dinner with each other, and they meet at the courthouse and other places around town, and they meet in the Mason Hall. He told me that. And he says they talk about your case, and they charge you $450 an hour for doing it. And when they talk about your case, they're deciding that case for you before you even get there, before you even have a hearing. Because with the true bill of the indictment, the court clerk does a bid bond. It's called a bid bond. It's in the state courts, it's the SF 223, 24, and 25A paperwork. That's the bid bond, performance bond, and payment bond. And in the federal court, it's the SF 273, 274, and 275. I have the papers right here. You're welcome to come up and look at them afterwards. I've got the actual forms. And those are online forms in the federal court. And the federal court clerks fill those out on a computer online with the Department of Fiscal Services. That's where those standard forms go. And they put in a bid bond. The bid bond tells the Department of Fiscal Services, which are bean counters, accountants, the accounting firm of the Treasury, to tell the Treasury to begin selling off the bonds in your estate, because we're going to need some liquid capital. Bonds aren't liquid. They're paper somewhere invested on Wall Street. You have to sell those bonds to create liquid capital in an account. And the Department of Fiscal Services holds that with the order of the bid bond that comes upon indictment. Now, wait a minute. You haven't even been tried yet. There's been no due process of law. You haven't been found guilty of anything, and they're liquidating funds in your estate. I'm going to go into the states here in a minute. And they did the bid bond. Let me tell you how it works. The indictment is a true bill. If you don't pay the bill, nobody bothers to ask, well, how much is the bill? And if you don't ask how much the bill, let's settle that matter today, well, then they bring you up on charges. Well, what are charges? If you get charged for something, it's a bill. Utility company sends you an invoice with charges on it. And you're brought up on charges. And if you don't bother to say, well, how much are the charges? How much is the bill? Let's settle this matter today. Then it goes to trial, where they may be holding your body as surety. And because they're trying your vessel, remember? Your ship, your shipping company, they're trying your vessel. Well, you, the man or the woman, are the purser on the ship, responsible for all the bills of lading, taxes, port charges, and resupplying of the ship. You're the signatory officer of your shipping company. And they can only go after commerce. So they're going after your ship in commerce. Your shipping company, not the man, but they're going to hold the man as the surety because he's the signatory. And it takes 3 signatures to put a man in prison. It takes the judges, the prosecutors, and yours, or whoever you gave power of attorney to. And you give your power of attorney away, and your attorney that you pay $25,000 meets with these 2. He says, I'll give you 10 or 15. I'll give you 10. You'll make 50. I'll make 40. And I'll make, what, 70? 80? 80? I didn't do that very well in my head. Haven't had enough coffee this morning. I'm on my first cup and it's sitting over here somewhere. Anyway, and they get together and they decide your fate. Because if you don't pay the charges and they hold your body as surety and they ask you to bond, and if you don't pay the bond, then they find you guilty and they sentence you. And when you go to trial, they do the performance bond, and they tell the Department of Fiscal Services that you're going to have to perform. That's when it's kind of for sure. They just found you guilty. And now you go to sentencing and they do the payment bond. And the payment bond, well, that's kind of like a wire transfer order sheet. Hey, we found him guilty, we sentenced him, we're holding his body as surety, here's the 3 signatures, wire transfer the money. And it used to be 6 years ago, before QFS, if they got the order by 11 a.m., they were paid by 5. And if they got it after 11, they were paid the following day. And then the court gets paid. And Congress helped them. Congress came out with a little act called the HISS Act, H-I-S-S, HISS Act. It's how the retired judges can't get in trouble coming back onto the bench. It's the HISS Act. It protects their stipends. Stipends. All they have to do is mention the word as they're leaving the bench that I'm going to be retiring. And that word protects their stipends under the HISS Act. And it protects all their retirement money, which averages between $150,000 to $200,000 per year per federal employee. That's just their stipend. Very interesting. And this is what happens on the criminal side. The civil side happens on all civil cases and all criminal cases. So if you're charged with a crime, a felony, where you're going to be sentenced to prison, they're getting paid on both ends. They're getting paid this way, and they're getting paid the way I showed you before, through the smaller bonds. I've got a list of bonds that the courts produce. I had a court clerk give me a list of all the different types of bonds that the court issues. I couldn't believe how many. So I go to the standard forms and I find the form numbers for all the types of bonds. And the state courts, all the state courts, get paid from the federal courts by the GSA program. The federal court clerks, this is why when you go to a federal courthouse, I'll just give you an example. The federal courthouse building in Portland, Oregon. It's an old building. It covers an entire city block. The top floor is the head judge, his courtroom, and all the people that work for him. The second floor down is split into thirds. There's 3 judges, 3 courtrooms, and the few people that work for the next 3. The next 2 floors are exactly the same. The 5th floor, which is ground level is the court clerk's floor. That's where the head court clerk, Mary, oh yeah, I know her name. That's where her office is. And then she's got a beautiful office. And then she's got all these court clerks that work for her. And they're in smaller offices. And then there's another floor below ground. And it's all cubicles full of court clerks. There's another level below ground. And it's all court clerks in cubicles. An entire city block of them. Hundreds of court clerks. Below that is another floor where it's about half court clerks and the other half is where they stick the U.S. Marshal's office. And below that's parking, 2 floors of it. They've got as many stories below ground as they have above ground. And when you walk into that beautiful old building that Antifa had a heyday with and burned it up in Portland, because, you know, they got to keep Portland weird. That's their slogan, like Austin's. That liberal ass mayor up there, man, he lets Antifa get away with anything. Anything. And the homeless problem? I can't even call it the city of roses anymore. It's a city of shit and piss. And it bothers me. It used to be a beautiful city. Mount Hood in the background, the Willamette and the Columbia River right there, the coast an hour and a half away. It used to be just a beautiful city with the West Hills, the Rose Gardens and the zoo and all the museums and the Schnitzer Concert Hall. It used to be just gorgeous. And now I can't even drive through it. It just churns my heart. Churns my heart. I took it from one of the most beautiful cities on earth to one of the ugliest in a decade or less. And it kills me. And the federal courts buy all the cases under the GSA program from every state and county court there is, and there's no judicial courts in a state. They're all administrative courts with magistrate judges under the administrative branch, working under the Department of Justice, which you guys learned yesterday is under the administrative branch of government.
Except our common law court in Texas, the Republic of Texas.
That's an Article 3 court, along with the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court of the United States is our court. It's our playground. It's where Bonnie and I take things. We don't go into those lower courts. What you have to do what I call set them up at the window. Most of the time, you know you're going to fail in the lower courts. That's okay. Don't worry about that. So you got to understand our courts, and you got to understand how they work. And you got to understand that a judge's order isn't even good for 30 days. You've got 30 days to void out at their orders. Most people walk out of the courtroom with a judge's order and they go, shit, I lost. They go home and cry. Bonnie and I go, all right, we got 30 days to turn this thing around. Void out that order. And we can void these orders. Because they're administrative judges and administrative courts under the administrative branch of government. They're not even judicial, and they're putting people in prison. And that's freaking wrong. And they're taking people's kids without even a warrant. And what is a warrant? What is a warranty? I don't care how it's spelled. What is a warrant? A declaration of war. Under the war powers, under the Emergency Act, under the Lieber Code, Executive Order number 100 by Abraham Lincoln has never been rescissioned. In fact, there's been 5 different acts of Congress that declare you, the people, the enemy, including the Patriot Act, the Buck Act, the Trading with the Enemy Act. Do you know they got an act of Congress called Trading with the Enemy, and the enemy is you? What the hell? I'm starting to sound like a Texan. What the hell? We don't talk like that on the West Coast. A warranty. Man, they indoctrinated you into that. Get that warranty on that toaster. Hey, you want a warranty on your phone? Want one on your microwave and on your refrigerator and on your washer and dryer, and you get one on your car so that you'll accept one on your house? And a young husband and wife buying their first home for their very first time, having no experience whatsoever, goes into escrow with their mortgage documents and signs all their documents, and the escrow officer, I used to own 20% of an escrow company. Gets all done, slides the papers carefully over to the side, and says, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, how would you like to hold title? Okay, young husband and wife buying their first home, being asked that question. What would you say? Well, I don't know. What are our options? They have no clue. No clue whatsoever. So the title officer is trained to say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, most husband and wives hold title and joint tenants in common through a warranty deed. Now they've been programmed. Joint, okay, that's husband and wife. They don't think about the word tenant being a renter, common being the state. They heard joint and they heard warranty. And the warranty was good on their toaster. It was good on their microwave and on their VCR and on their television set and on their phone and on their car. So we might as well have a warranty deed on our house. And it's a declaration of war that you accept. Because we don't know the damn English language. We were never taught in school. All these English teachers, well, they don't know shit. I learned that because you study Latin and you study Hebrew along with the English language. and you study history back to the 1200s, and I can show you one of my grandfathers that graduated from Oxford University in the 1200s, who is known as the father of algorithms. The father of algorithms in the 1200s. And you read papers from Oxford University from the 1200s, and you see how much of the English language we've lost. You know what the number one, I told you yesterday, the number one language teaching company in the world is? Babbel. We're taught Babbel. Come out of her, O ye Babylon. That's come out of the corporate construct. The only way you can come out of the corporate construct is to learn the English language and quit using Babbel. You know what they teach our black people in our inner cities? Eubonics. Can't understand what half of them say. And I love our brothers. Every single man, woman, and child is a son or daughter of God, and he's my brother. And it doesn't matter what their skin color is, what they look like, what handicaps they have. It doesn't matter. And I watch them fight in our inner cities like Chicago, where there's more murders than anywhere else. And it's most of them killing each other. And on the West Coast, the Asian communities murder each other. And in Southern California, it's the Spanish communities, and they're murdering each other. And I'm watching this happen in this country that I love, that I think is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. You ever been up the East Coast, the Northeast in the fall? The colors of the trees, the beaches, the mountains of Oregon and Washington and California. Ever been to Tahoe, Yosemite, Crater Lake, Mount Hood? I've been all over this country. Grand Canyon, Moab, Yellowstone, the Tetons. We've got one of the most beautiful countries in the world. And we are freaking destroying it from our lack of knowledge. This is all about education. And I would give anything to have a room, and I have had before, where half of them are attorneys and judges and police officers. Believe it or not, in a town in Minnesota, the event was put on by a judge at a country club, and she paid for everything. I remember her walking into the bar and saying, putting her credit card down, and I was with her, and she said, anything those people need in that room, put it on here. And she bought everybody breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they drank a lot. Lawyers drink a lot. I noticed that right off. I drink iced tea, but they drink a lot. And she paid for everything. And the room was filled with lawyers, judges, and police officers. I still look at it as one of the funnest events I'd ever had, and it wasn't filmed. She insisted it not be filmed. I wish it was, because we had a good time. This is the criminal side. It leads, just like I talked about yesterday, into real estate and how they steal your home from you. Your ranches, your farms, they steal it all. And they stole it on behalf of the state, and you, the best slaves, are the ones who believe they are free and believe they own their own home. and you believed you owned it. Well, the law says all property shall be held under land patent, transferred via grant deed, and described in metes and bounds. But you went into the title company, and because you got a loan on the property, or somebody did at one time, you might be the fourth, fifth, sixth owner, you ended up with a warranty deed, a declaration of war that you accept. And they declared war on you, and you're joint tenants in common, a joint renter to the state, and that's why you pay property tax. That's your rent. And you pay your rent, or they take your property. And the whole time, you were indoctrinated to believe you owned it. It's yours. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, thank you today. Here's the keys. Welcome to being proud new homeowners. I'll prepare that deed for you and get it recorded. And out the door they go. And all the mortgage documents are recorded, sent back to the bank, and the deed's prepared, and it's filed with the county. And you're the proud new renter of the state. And the county, all counties, steal your home on behalf of your state, and they use a variety of people with them: a real estate agent, a title officer, an appraiser, a county recorder, a county clerk, a plot planner, on and on and on. We can go on and on and on. And all those people with the blinders on, just thinking they're doing their job and going to work every day and feeding their family and are your next door neighbors probably, might even be coming over to your house for a barbecue. When you put them all together, it's a conspiracy to defraud you and steal your property for the state. And they don't know that. It's not their fault. They had their blinders on. The real estate board trained them, the state trained them, the MLS trained them, the colleges trained them, and they don't even know. Do we have any appraisers in the room? That's too bad. Every time I do, he confirms what I'm about to tell you. Oh. Yeah. You're an appraiser? Seriously? What's this mean? You're not quite sure at the moment because you're not sure I'm going to pick on you. Oh, gosh. All right. Well, for years, 3 of the companies I've owned were real estate development companies. I used to own 2 mortgage companies, a construction company, a real estate development company, 3 real estate development companies, 20% of a title company. I've owned 2 mortgage companies. I've started and ran 13 businesses in my life, not including the farms and ranches, because I'm a farm boy at heart. Every piece of property in the United States has an underlying land patent. I want you to think of it as a great, big, huge, giant, and it is. It's soil, rock, all the way to the center of the earth. But for now, for this example, think of it as a great big chunk of concrete. It's such a big chunk of concrete, not even the biggest excavator can move it, okay? Just can't be moved. And it's got a huge eye hook on it, where you hook the biggest chain there is. A shipping container shipping ship's chain, anchor chain. How's that? Each link weighs about 1,100 pounds. Okay? Add them all together, drop to the bottom of the ocean. It's a lot of weight. And that anchor chain is hanging off there. Land patent. Land patents are so important, they're signed off by a president, except in Texas. I told you this yesterday. In Texas, they're signed by the Republic of Texas. That's where they were issued prior to the state of taking over. Land patents. Every property has an underlying land patent. The Bureau of Land Management holds land patents for the rest of the states except for the original 13 and Texas. Okay? That land patent has a number. This is an actual land patent from Oregon. That was the number of the land patent from Oregon, because this was a sign that was hung on the, it was done in aluminum and was hung on the property. Okay? 043860. That's the land patent number, signed by a president of the United States. Or not even the federal government can take that property away from who he issued it to. Now, at some point in time, that original person who had paid a small fee and made some improvements to acquire that land patent, that man may have had a son, and he was getting old, and he gave it to his son. He deeded it to his son through a grant deed. And that man became the grantor. And through a grant deed, he gave it to his son, who became the grantee. And maybe his son got old, and they transferred it to his son. And he became the grantor, and the next person became the grantee. And this is what's known as a chain of title. And it goes on. Maybe they sold it, and somebody came in and bought it for cash, and they signed a grant deed. And the man selling it became the grantor, and the man buying it became the grantee. Well, at some point in time, I want you to remember that, some point in time. You know, that's the nice thing about fraud. The nice thing about fraud is the words, at some point in time. At some point in time, fraud is recognized. Dave, you could have came to me 30 years ago, and I could have told you a story, and you said, I want to help you with that. How about I give you, I can afford $50 a month. How about I give you $50 a month? And you thought it was a worthy cause, and you started sending me checks in the mail for $50 a month. And you've been doing it for 30 years. And after 30 years, I feel guilty, and I come to you, Dave, and I said, Dave, you know that story I told you 30 years ago? I made that shit up. I'm sorry. I apologize. Will you accept my forgiveness? Forgive me. Maybe he will, maybe he won't personally, but at that point in time, I owe him every dime that he's ever paid because I committed fraud. And every dime is collectible. It doesn't matter about the statute of limitations. Fraud vitiates everything. Okay? And at some point in time, so we're going to call this link at some point in time. The county came along with their planner and their real estate agent and their mortgage companies and all the other people, and they tied a string onto that chain, that unbreakable chain of title, and they started issuing a warranty deed. And here's that first person right here that got a warranty deed. Now that property could have been sold 2, 3 more times, and then there's you. And you come in and buy that property. It's your dream property. And you come in and buy it through another warranty deed. For this period of time, it's been the state's property, held by a renter. And you're just another renter. But you earn that money with your hard-earned dollars, your sweat of your brow, and you believe you're the homeowner. And you come to a David Straight seminar and you learn about land patents, or a Ron Gibson seminar, or a Bobby Warren seminar, and you learn about land patents, and you see the fraud. At some point in time, fraud must be recognized. When did Dave recognize it? When I came back and told him the story. That was the point in time. And I said, hey, I'm sorry. See, that was the point in time. And that's when fraud is recognized. And from there back, everything is owed. Fraud vitiates everything. There's a reason I'm telling you like I'm telling you. Okay? What you need to do, since you came to the seminar, is you know now you need a grant deed and not a warranty deed. You need to be the grantee. So you have to research your chain of title, find the point in time, find the original land patent, create a grant deed, and attach your new chain, unbreakable chain, where you're the grantee, and all the fraud falls away. None of those warranty deeds mattered. Fraud vitiates everything, as if it never were. And that all falls away. And you accept the last grant deed, creating your new grant deed, and you refile and put on the record with a sworn affidavit or testimony under the pains and penalties of perjury, and you get it recorded. And you get that grant deed recorded. And you get that land patent accepted, and you get it recorded. And now you own your property. Now it's the king's land. And now government can't tell you what the hell to do on it. It's your land. And you need to understand that and understand how important it is. And one of your first steps, oh, wow, I get right there and that speaker hits. One of your first steps is to get Ron's book. See, Ron is another fellow Oregonian. And back in 2009, I was putting my property in the land patent. And I held a little class of people, and I started telling them what I was doing and teaching what I was doing. And one of the guys in the class goes, hey, there's a guy down in Grants Pass, Oregon. I think his name is Tom. You guys ought to get together and compare notes. Make sure you do this right. And I said, that's a great idea. So I pack up my truck on a Friday night, and I head to Grants Pass, Oregon, and I start searching all over the place for this guy named Tom doing his land patent. And I went to every title company and every mortgage broker I knew, and the banks and the county offices, and I'm pretty good at finding people. I know how to canvass. I can find anybody anywhere. And I started looking for this guy named Tom. And I finally ran into this lady, and I said, hey, it's Sunday. I'm about ready to give up and go home. I got to be at work at Monday morning, 3 hours away. And I said, hey, I'm looking for this guy named Tom. He's doing a land patent. Do you happen to know who he is or where I can find him? Grants Pass isn't that big a town. Probably 20,000. And she goes, yeah, I think you mean Ron. So all weekend I've been looking for the wrong guy. And she says, I says, you don't happen to have his phone number, do you? And she goes, yeah, I got it right here. Here's his name, here's his address, his contact information. You got a phone? I'll just send it to you. And she gave me his contact information. I walk out the door, I call up Ron Gibson. And I said, Ron, can I buy you dinner? It's Sunday night. I hope you haven't eaten yet. And he said, no, I haven't. I said, are you available? He says, absolutely. Where would you like to eat? I said, I don't know. This is your town. You tell me, and I'll meet you there. And I went and bought Ron dinner, and we talked, and we started comparing notes, and we were doing things exactly the same. And Ron went on to become an expert. He knows far more about it than I do. He became a federal witness for land patents. He's very super knowledgeable and one of the greatest guys I ever know. And he's getting old and his health isn't that good and it's hard for him to walk. And he's got diabetes real bad and his legs swell up. And I'm worried that we're going to lose him. And he's one of the greatest patriots there are. He wrote another book called You Are Not a Slave. Ron's a smart man. And this was one of the greatest books I've ever read. The first 100 pages tell you all about all the different types of land patents and all the laws of why not even the federal government can take your land from you. And then the process starts on page 114. Of how to put your property in land patent. And it tells you the process you got to go through. I highly recommend this book. Now, along came something else. I was putting on a seminar like this in Southern Oregon, and Ron went. And he was sitting right about in the middle of the room in the audience. And I'm doing a 3-day seminar just exactly like this one. And Ron comes up to me at lunchtime and he says, David, I got a little bit of a problem. He said, a couple of the people that I put their properties in land patent, the county has taken their properties from them. And we've gone to court and we testified and we lost. And we really don't know why. Because all the laws show that no one can take that property from you. And I says, all right, we're going to talk about this after today. Tonight we're going to dinner and we're going to figure it out. And I got on the phone and I started calling everyone that I'd helped put their properties in land patents. And I had done about 95 of them. And I called them all. And all my people, none of them had lost their homes. And I'm going, Ron, you and I do the same process. In fact, I follow your book because it's better. I don't have time to write books. So I follow your book and I teach people out of your book. I says, what is going on? Why did a couple of yours have a problem? You've done far more of them than I have. You concentrated on that. Well, I'm out there doing 8 million different things. And I learned something from one of the people I called. He said, David, the county came after me too, but I beat them. And I said, why? He goes, because I never consented to their tax statement. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, you think the county gives up? They don't give up. They want to keep trying to steal your property back and somehow win it back. Somehow declare war on you and somehow win it back. So they mail you a tax statement. He said, and that whole tax statement is full of errors. Everything on it's a lie. And when most people get that in the mail and they write a check and they pay the bill and they acquiesce and they jump right back into their jurisdiction. And I said, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm teaching people to do that without knowing it exactly in those words, so it didn't make as much sense. I'm telling people, well, after you get your land patent, don't ever pay your taxes again. And that's what I used to say. I said that it's untaxable. Land patent property is no longer real estate. That means the state's estate. It's not the estate of the state. Real estate, it's private property in the law. It's a king's land. So I've been teaching my people all along, all 95 of them that I'd done patents for, I taught them not to pay the property tax bill. Don't ever pay it again. They might send you one, but don't ever pay it. So we started solidifying the process. Take a property tax bill, and this is a friend of mine in Indiana, Douglas. And this is his property tax bill. Now, Doug, his property sits on 2 land patents, 6743 and 6747. That's his land. The numbers are a lot smaller as you go east. In Pennsylvania, I ran into land patent number 71. And for several years, I'm thinking to myself, man, I'd like to see one older than this. And then one day, somebody in my class sent me one from Ohio that was land patent number 1. Well, I can't get one older than that. It was signed by George Washington. 71 was signed by John Adams. Okay. Land patent number 6743 and 6747. So the county sent my friend Doug here an invoice in the mail. Now these are 1-page deals. I told Doug, let's fix this problem right now. Let's make a whole bunch of color copies of it. So we made a whole bunch of colored copies. And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to start at the upper left-hand corner and we're going to start correcting one error at a time. So we started at the upper left-hand corner, and in this first box, it says parcel number 92-10-08-101-076.00-006. Now, who made that shit up? I've studied the law for 35 years. I've never seen where a county has the authority to turn a land patent number into a parcel number. There's no law that says that. Where'd that come from? Some policy manual? That's just the way they've been doing business with their blinders on. Who made that crap up? It's not law. So I said, let's circle that. Let's draw a circle down on a blank spot of the page and write land patent numbers 6743 and 6747. Please correct your error. When you study the law, you'll see that it's okay for government officials to make administrative errors. And this is how they go about stealing your property without them even knowing. Because it came out of some policy manual and some job manual somewhere on a private for-profit corporation acting and pretending to be government under the color of law. And everything colorable is a fallacy. So they just start their SMU, making shit up. And that's what they do. It's just shit made up. And so we write Exhibit A at the bottom. We go to the next box. This one says property type, real estate. Well, we'd already studied in the law what that means. That means the estate of the state. Well, it's got to be an administrative error because I have the land patent and the grant deed, and it's described in meets and bounds, and I own my property. I'm the king. It's the king's land. Real estate. So we circle that and say, please correct your error. It should say private property. It's not real estate. It's not residential property. It's not this, not that. See Exhibit B. Go to the next error. This was his own name. It says name, Dyson, comma, Doug. Now, if you know my friend Douglas Allen Dyson, he does not like to be called Doug. And he sure doesn't like to be called Dyson, comma, Doug. And there's a maximum law that says you must know the name of a thing to sue a thing. That's interesting. Circle the error, red pen, go down to a blank spot on the page, draw another circle, and say, please correct your error. The name is Douglas Allen Dyson. See Exhibit C. Go to the next error. Still way up here on the left-hand corner again. We just went across the top of the page. We're on line 2. And they're still making errors. This is his address. Incorrect address. This puts him in a federal district, and it puts him in the state of district. Now, what do I mean by that? I want you to go to Google and you write state abbreviations, and you're going to get things like IN for Indiana, OR for Oregon, TX for Texas. And then I want you to write state abbreviations, and you're going to get IND period, ORE period, TEXAS for Texas. It's short, so they use the whole thing. Oklahoma. And you're going to see a different set of abbreviations for each one. One is this beautiful land and soil and nation that we live in called the United States of America, in one of the 50 nation states. And the other one you're going to see is a private for-profit corporation called the state of, in Doug's case, Indiana. And then it's going to have a zip code, and that zip code makes you live in Washington, D.C., puts you in one of the federal zones. And by the sheer use of your zip code, you live in Washington, D.C. and reside, as Doug does in Indiana, temporarily to do business. Now he's in commerce under admiralty law, where his vessel is taxed, where he doesn't own his property, where he doesn't own himself, he doesn't own his kids, he doesn't own his car, he doesn't own his land. And he's regulated by 2 billion codes and statutes telling you what you cannot do. No person shall do this. No person shall do that. Read your statutes. They all start off that way. Telling you can't build a fence this high, this close, this color. You can't paint your house purple. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't drill a well on your own without getting somebody's permit, somebody's permission. You can't do anything. You can't repair your car in most driveways. You can't do anything. You can't talk on your phone while traveling. Now, you may not should do that anyway, just for safety, but that should be up to you by your love of mankind, that you don't want to harm your fellow man. Your job is to protect everyone around you, and you damn well be able to protect them. Understand that, okay? Love your neighbor and do no harm. And you can't break any other laws. Did you know that? As long as you love your neighbor and do no harm, you can't break any other laws.
Is that land patent include mineral rights?
Oh, yeah. Bonnie put her office building in the land patent, our home in the land patent. You should have seen the companies call us on the phone saying, hey, can we buy your mineral rights again? Because those were all sold years ago out from underneath those properties. But you took them all back. You own from the center of the earth to the top of the sky. Don't try and tell me the earth's flat. So you need to correct your address, because your address is the way the USPS wants it. And we all know that's a private for-profit corporation, and it's not the United States Post Office. It's the same brick building with the same employees, and you can walk in the same door. And you can deal with either the USPS or you can deal with the USPO, depending on how you mail your mail. There are 2 or more of everything in this country, like I taught you yesterday. 2 or more of everything. Once you learn that, that's how you convince your family that won't listen to you, your neighbors that won't listen to you, your pastor that won't listen to you. You start teaching them the basics. 1 + 1 is 2 before you go into algebra. See, let me ask you this. How many law classes did you guys have kindergarten through 12th grade? Y'all had algebra though, right? See, the government knew it's a government-funded, government-controlled curriculum. Government taught teachers that have to be licensed and have gone to a government college to teach, all indoctrinated, to teach the students all about algebra. And they knew 99.97% of the world's population would never use algebra after high school. They knew that. Yet it was a required class and they made you learn it. And they failed you if you didn't. And they knew that the minute you turned 15 and you got your learner's permit, you'd be dealing with the law the rest of your life in many, many different ways every single day. And they didn't teach you one thing about the law. Not one. And for the lack of knowledge, my people shall be destroyed. And then you have a high percentage of this population who have had problems with the law. I wonder why. They don't even know how courts work. They don't even know the order of courts. They don't know that a judge's order doesn't even take effect for 30 days. A treaty doesn't take effect for 90 days. They don't know nothing. And they do everything that a magistrate tells them to do because, by God, he's the judge. And he's not even a judge. He only acts as a judge when he's in that one little jurisdiction, which he administrates that fast, as I told you yesterday. He goes through the jurisdiction of the air and the jurisdiction of the land that quick, and he moves right into commerce. And then he's an administrator, a magistrate in a magistrate court, acting and pretending to be government under the color of law, violating his oath of office that you elected him for. Immediately, because he took a superior oath to the bar, and that overrides his oath to you every time. Every single time. And you don't know it. So you keep going into those fraud courts, and you keep having your life destroyed and being fined. Your kids taken from you, your car is taken from you, your home's taken from you, thrown in prison. And none of that needed to happen unless there was a victim, and then, boy, God, I'm tough on crime. If you intentionally harmed another fellow being, I'm all for capital punishment. But every law school has done studies on our prison system in the United States of America, and they say between 61 and 64%. They all agree. 61 to 64% of all the prisoners in our prison system do not belong there because there was no victim. And the state of corporation is not a victim and cannot be. They're bonded and insured. The county of is not a victim, and the city of is not a victim. And yet 9 times out of 10, they're the ones bringing the case. And neither is the federal government as a victim. In fact, you are the creditor. You are the full faith and credit of the United States government. You are bonded, you are insured, and you have money in the bank you don't even know about, that if you do have an accident, you do something wrong. And I'm going to tell you right now what your trust is made for as soon as I finish this. The next one, Exhibit E, legal description. Lot 76 of Stable Acres subdivision. Now, who made that shit up? Some developer. I know, because I used to have a development company. And we just made shit up all the time. What do you want to name this street, Bob? My partner? What do you want to name this street? What do you want to call this subdivision? We just bought this 67 acres. We're going to build 300 homes. We're going to put in 7 miles of streets and cul-de-sacs and all the utilities, and we're going to develop it. What do we want to call our new subdivision? And then we go to the county planner with our plot plan, and we lay it all out, and he stamps it and approves it and says, all right, you guys are experienced. Go ahead. We go to the surveyor and say, hey, here's $150,000. Go mark every corner and every street where all the utilities go. And we go to the real estate agent and say, list all these properties, start selling them, start with this section first. It's going to be section A, and we're going to have section B. When this is 70% full, we're going to start building on this one. And when this is 70% full, we're going to start. And we go out and build 300 homes. And we sell them all under a warranty deed. God, I didn't know anything back then. What an idiot I was. I hadn't had a clue that I was going to sell all these homes to all these people and give them to the state. In fact, there was a whole section of the plot plan, I had to give all those 7 miles of streets and roads and utilities to the county. Sign off here. That's a lot of land. You add it up, it's 30 feet wide, 7 miles long. How many acres is that? Not only did I have to pay for their streets, their sidewalks, their utilities, and put them all in, but I had to give it to them when I was done. And I paid for every darn acre. That's 7% interest. Oh, what a joke. Error, see attached, lawful meets and bounds, land patent number 6743 and 6747, a part and parcel thereof described as. And then the lawful meets and bounds. That's the correction to lot 76 of Stable Acres subdivision. See Exhibit E. Exhibit F, oh, this one's fun. He circled all the money. He says, please correct your error. Land patents are tax exempt as private property. I want to see an invoice come back with 0.00. Exhibit F. Oh, then he circled all the boxes because attorneys love boxes. And as we know by Stiles, anything in box not part of a contract. So this is the way they limit the liability of the county and put it all on you. Because that's what attorneys are good at. Any contract an attorney writes removes the liability for the one he wrote the contract for and places it all on the one he didn't. I guarantee it. That's how it works. See Exhibit G. And then you do a affidavit. And item by item by item, see Exhibit A, B, C, D, E, and you explain it all to them and you tell them to correct their errors and they'll accept it. And you send it back, registered mail. And then they're going to send you another one. Don't give up. The first one to leave the battlefield loses. It ain't over till the fat lady sings, until you're dead, bleeding, and laying on the ground and dragged off the battlefield. You don't quit. You keep firing. I don't care if you're bloody and wounded. You keep firing. And you don't give up. And that's one of the biggest problems with state nationals. Is we go in, we try something, we didn't know who the receiver was, how much knowledge they have. It didn't work because they said, no, I can't do that or something. They make up some excuse. And it doesn't work for you the first time. And you go, oh, David, that shit you taught me doesn't work. And I can send 3 more people in right behind you, and it works for 2 out of the 3. Well, how come it didn't work for you and the other guy? Because 2 of them didn't give up. And they took in their tool belts. And their tool belts was stacked. And they go in with their tool belts and they start whipping out, oh, yes, you must record this document. Here's the law that says you have to. Don't tell me you're not going to. Otherwise, that's open to a cause of action in federal court. And I'm just going to, what color are your drapes? Because I'm going to take your house and the toys your kids play with if you don't. You're my public servant. I'm one of we the people. I am the full faith and credit of the United States government. You work for me. Get that straight. If I write and find something so important that I write it in pencil on a napkin, like the Lee resolution, and I find it important enough that it needs to be put on the public record, then that county attorney damn well better record it, because it's up to me. It's that important. It needs to be in the public record. Would we even have a copy of the Lee resolution if one of our founding fathers wouldn't have recorded it? If the county recorder at that time, back in that day, would have said, oh no, the county attorney told me I can't record your document. Is it the county attorney's responsibility under his oath or yours? Under your oath. Here's the law. I've already shown you. It's called notice to clerk, guys. It's on the website. It's on the Telegram channels. You damn well better record the document. Otherwise, I'm not coming after the county attorney's house. I'm coming after yours.
If I could.
You can.
Okay.
Love you, Bobby.
I love you too, brother. So, fellas, this is really important. One of the first hurdles you're going to run into is at the county recorder when you try to record your Freedom Bundle. And this is why it's really important to comprehend words. And on the Telegram channel, there's Black's Law Dictionary. And in the 4th edition, about the time that some of these deeds offices were set up, look up the word deeds. And it's interesting because the second paragraph down, the first paragraph deals with land, how it's transferred from one to another. But the word deeds is better described through Supreme Court citations in the second paragraph. And it is deeds that have been done in reality between people or between men. The deeds of people are to be recorded in time. And when you write things down, you're recording your deeds to be kept over time so people can see them and you now have standing. So here's how I do it, and I've told some people to do this. Get them to, we only record deeds. That's great. Can you write that down for me so I can accept that? And they write it down. And that we only record deeds, and that's fantastic. So you get it and you put your name on it, that they record deeds. And then you pull out your screenshot of Black's Law 4th edition, which is free on the Telegram channel, all 9 editions. And in Black's Law Dictionary, the definition of the word deeds are things that have been done in reality as opposed to in fact. Things that have been done and written down in reality as opposed to things that have only been done in fact or at law. How many of you ever saw an attorney at law on one of those? Attorney at law, they're just trying to get at law. Someone's trying to get at you. Okay? Something that has been done in reality has been done in law. And the deeds of men, the wombed and the unwombed, when they say men, they mean wombed and unwombed, mankind. The deeds of men shall be recorded. And here's why it's so important when David talks about these circles up here at the top. These circles, when you look at circles, it's a chain. And through a long chain of events, you evince over time your free will and your intention. And your deeds, your free will must be recorded over time. And that is the deeds of men, the wombed and the unwombed. So when you run into that situation, whether it's your land patent or your freedom bundle, you have to comprehend what the word deeds is. All right? And then you take what is in law, not at law, but what is in law, which is in reality, and you lay it down. Once they tell you they only record deeds, now you use that against them. Because you see, you accepted their definition that they record deeds, but they don't know what the word deeds means. Remember when Bill Clinton says, well, it all depends on what the word is. And I'm not picking on Bill Clinton because this is not a political movement. This is a freedom movement to empower people, all people of every shape, color, size, no matter what color your eyes are, what color your skin is, the shape of your eyes, who you love, who you don't love. It's not about that. It's about setting people free, isn't it, brother? It is. It is, it is. So, words and what they mean. All right. Lunch wagon said they'll be ready in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
I have a question real quick, guys.
Oh, no. Who gave her the mic?
She stole it.
Stop it. Is it true, David, that it is very important that when you are listing in your land patent that you're using silver coin and not Federal Reserve notes? And if so, why?
Excellent.
Oh, like I said yesterday, you should always use silver coin in your transactions. It doesn't have to be all of the transaction. Like I explained with the property that I bought in Oregon, I bought it for $20 of silver and other considerations. Well, the other consideration was $1.5 million in fiat currency cash. But what did the transfer deed say? $20 in other consideration, $20 in silver and other consideration. Chairman of Federal Reserve Boards write books. Ex-IRS heads write books when they retire. I suggest you look up who the ex-heads of departments are, if you want to learn, and buy their darn books. Because I've learned more from some of their books than I've learned from the law books. Key little things that solve everything. Like one of our former IRS heads wrote in his book, he says, we've never understood why anyone pays the income tax. Why? He says, there's no tax on debt notes. Well, then I found that in the law. And then a Federal Reserve note, which it says on the top of every one of your bills in your wallet, is a debt instrument. If it's a debt instrument, how can it be considered income or wages? It's considered a debt. It's never discharged or never settled. It doesn't pay off any bills. It tenders them to a later date. That's why it's called legal tender. You can find that in the books that the Federal Reserves have written. On and on and on we go. One little piece of the puzzle put over here and one little piece of the puzzle put over here. And it takes somebody who reads one heck of a lot and is able to pull those pieces of puzzles out and put it all over and build that puzzle so you can see what the picture of life looks like in the United States, the world. This isn't a United States problem, guys. 100 million people worldwide are following me. 100 million. That's what I'm being told by the top levels of government. And these idiots at newspapers that say I'm a terrorist, I'm going to own their damn newspaper and their house. That's slander, and my name is copyrighted, trademarked, and my DNA is patented. And I own my own name, I own myself, I've claimed my trust, I've changed my status, I have limited diplomatic immunity, I've never been arrested for any crime in this country in my entire life, and I've been in over 2,000 courtrooms, and I hold public servants accountable for their actions, and I take their house and the toys their kids play with and remove those judges from the bench. And I get thousands of children back to their parents.
And the reporters that don't do their darn research first, they got the opportunity to write just as big a retractment as they put in the ad, and if it's 1 square inch smaller, then I'm going to own their house and the toys their kids play with, and I'll haul them into federal court in Dallas under trademark infringement and slander, and I will take their house and own their paper. And you can ask a few other news companies out there if that hasn't already happened. I want you to understand that, because this room should have had 600 people in it. And one article in the newspaper cost a lot of people from not learning this knowledge that is so critically important to every American. They ought to be damn ashamed of themselves. And I've been called to teach attorneys at the Department of Justice. And I'm not a lawyer, because I win more lawsuits than they ever do. There was a nice article in New York City, came out in the New York City paper one day, where some judge from Nebraska called me the most winning attorney in the United States, that I had more cases in courts across the United States than anyone else, and I didn't. Not under my name. But they knew it was mine because of my documents, and it was in people like your names. And it was parents getting their children back, and it was other people filing documents in their name, but they knew it was all came from me because it was all in my writing. And they've recognized my writing style and how I hold them accountable, because I do it different than anyone else in the country. I call them out for the frauds that they are, for acting and pretending to be government under color law, for violation of Title 18 and 42, 241 and 242, 1983, and so forth. And I call them out with their Dun & Bradstreet numbers, their corporate charters, acting and pretending to be government. I expose their oaths. I expose how they get paid. I know who I am. So when I do put my name on something, I write the all caps name -Vessel by David Lester, straight upper and lowercase, as a living soul, because I'm the signatory officer of the vessel. I own that vessel, that ship. Because I've claimed the minor estate. And when you do that and you make the claims and you put them in, and you have that access, and you are a state national, one of we the people who created government, and that which one creates one controls, and that's a maximum of law. Write that one down. That in which one creates one controls. And by God, we the people created government. Government created the U.S. citizen. And a citizen is a slave class. I read you out of the law yesterday about that. And we can keep going. There's more. Turning a right into a privilege under color of law is a conspiracy against right in violation of 18 U.S.C. section 241 and 242. Crimes of this nature are subject to fines of not more than 20 years of imprisonment or both. 18 U.S.C. section 1341. It is a crime for a powerful corporation like Jackson County to abuse the process and attempt to overpower the individual with swarms of officers and a huge law chest. Antitrust laws at 15 U.S.C. Articles 1 through 7, the Sherman Antitrust Act and the Clayton Antitrust Act are in place to protect the individual from power tactics used by the state. Any attempt by the county or state to convert a claimant's property into a commercial asset for the benefit of municipal corporations without compensation is a tort claim condemned in a court case called the City of Monterey versus Monty Dunes Limited. The Supreme Court has ruled that municipalities cannot exert any acts of ownership and control over property that is not owned by them. Palacio versus Rhode Island. That's a 2001 case. These aren't old cases, guys. There's no expiration date on the taking clause for any city's illegal enforcements of its codes on the man's private property and restricting the man's private business in any way, shape, or form. Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Council. It's a 1992 case. They like case law, we can give them case law. Now, when we go in, we sue them under the Constitution. We don't use case law. In fact, we have a little saying, the first one that uses case law loses. Case law is for them. They want case law. Attorneys love case law. What is case law? It's the opine of a judge. Well, that judge trying that case may not have liked the way you looked, the way you talked, and the documents you filed. He may not have liked your time frames. You might have missed some kind of procedure. Okay? So he didn't like it, so he ruled against you. Maybe he couldn't understand you. Your language was bad. And he ruled against you, and he wrote an opinion. An opinion is not fact. And he wrote an opinion, and that opinion became case law. Well, in my 35 plus years of experience with the law, that's just shit made up. He could have been racially biased, politically motivated. There's a number of things that could affect that decision. It's not fact. And no judge can put fact upon the record. If he did, he'd have to get down off the judge's stand and take the witness stand and be questioned under proper due process of law. And I'm happy to throw him up there on federal court. And I'll pull that local judge. We'll take him into federal court. We'll put him up on the witness stand, and he can answer our questions. Because we're the only one that puts truth and fact on the record. We put it down via the form of an affidavit, sworn under the pains and penalties of perjury. No one on the other side ever does. No prosecutor puts facts on the record. Everything is hearsay, even when they call your name. I don't know if you saw my Telegram channel, but I posted an old Ed Sullivan, I think. Was it Johnny? Okay, Johnny Carson show, an old one from like the 60s, where he interviewed one of the most winning attorneys in the United States. And he says, how do you win all your cases? And he said, what's your name? And Johnny looks at him like, what? He says, yeah, what's your name? He says, Johnny Carson. Well, how do you know? Johnny looks at him and says, well, my mom called me Johnny all my life. Well, that's hearsay. How do you know? Well, it's on my birth certificate. Well, who wrote that there? Did you write it? Well, no. So that's what they told you were called. That's hearsay. I object, Your Honor. It's hearsay. A police officer gets up on the stand and is supposed to be given testimony. He wasn't even at the crime. His job's to show up 20 minutes later and draw the chalk outline. File the report. He wasn't there. He didn't see it. Was he a first-hand witness? Well, did the prosecutor put the first-hand witness on the stand? Somebody who saw what happened? No. Well, even one witness isn't good enough. We need a cooperating witness. We need two. Takes two witnesses. Well, he ain't there either. There's not one, there's not two. Well, then it's hearsay.
We have to get them to follow their own rules, and they don't. I was in federal court, and I watched a federal court judge look at a young lady, and it's recorded, and there's press outside recording it, and he looked down at that young lady and he said, "You'll get your constitutional rights when and if I decide." It's on the public record. All you gotta do is order the transcript. Now that constitutes warring against the Constitution, doesn't it? Wouldn't you say, David?
Yeah.
I watched the judge do the prosecutor's job with hearsay evidence. There's only three ways we can get evidence into a courtroom, right?
Yep.
Right, David?
Yep.
What are those three ways? Does anybody know? An affidavit, a deposition, or a direct witness. That's the only three ways that evidence can be entered into a court. So everything that comes out of the prosecutor's mouth is hearsay.
So what do you mean he only filed motions? The judge tells you to put in a motion. Get the court to move. A motion is just an ask. It's a beg of the court. Do we pray to the court? Attorneys pray to the court. I don't know about you, but I only pray to God. He's the only one I answer to. I don't answer to anybody else. I'm the damn king. And God is the King of Kings. That's what he said. That's what he told me. He says, I am the King of Kings. He never said he was the king of slaves. Not one time. Not one single time. My mentor, my 23-year federal prosecutor who taught me this, very first weekend, he says, courts are all about and then he whips out this law dictionary and he looks up the word railroading and he reads it to me. And he says it's to lead someone down a narrow path or rail to a predetermined outlook or conclusion. And that's what he did for 23 years as a federal prosecutor. He said, that right there is what my job was all about for 23 years before he retired. Ta-da! To lead someone down a narrow path or rail to a predetermined outlook or conclusion. That's why they'll indict a ham sandwich. Because whatever the prosecutor puts in front of the grand jury causes the indictment or the true bill or invoice. And where was your chance to put on evidence to the grand jury? Did they hear from you? Those that have been indicted in the room. Did they get to hear from you? Did they get to hear your witnesses and your testimony and your statement? Did they get to see your facts and truth put upon the record? So the grand jury indicts. And some judge issues a war rant, a declaration of war. And the sheriff brings it to your home. And he picks you up. And you're a hard-working man just feeding your family. Going to work every day and coming home and loving on his kids.
and you didn't do anything wrong. There was no corpus delicti. There was no victim. And because of what some DA said happened, without any witness, without any corroborating witness, without any sworn testimony under the pains and penalties of perjury, without any evidence, except for maybe some report some cop wrote 3 days later off of his showing up 20 minutes after the event happened and not seeing it for himself, wrote. Or maybe it was just an anonymous tip that started this whole thing. And he puts you in handcuffs, and instead of doing his job and following proper due process of law and take you immediately in front of a magistrate, he takes you to the jail. Puts you in the back of the car because he knows, just like I used to know when I was a police officer, that most people incriminate themselves on the ride to the station. And he gets you to the station and he puts you in a little room where you sweat. You're usually thirsty. You're hungry. Never been arrested before. And somebody comes in and you just start spilling your guts when your attorney would have told you to shut up and not say anything. But you didn't have one yet, and he hasn't really offered you one yet because they don't even read your Miranda rights anymore. And that's a violation of due process. That's a requirement to be read your Miranda rights. So they violate your due process again. Then you incriminate yourself maybe just a little bit, like you say your name, your address, your phone number. Did you know those are all incriminating? Because without even knowing it, you gave them the vessel name, because it sounds a lot like yours. And you believe it's you. And it's not, it's just your shipping company. And you start throwing yourself under the bus without knowing it. It's like legal suicide. But and they presume your status, your standing, and your jurisdiction. They assume you committed some crime, even though they don't have any first-hand witnesses, no evidence, no nothing. They almost never do. So what do they have to do? They have to, government operates through the consent of the governed. They have to get your tacit agreement Let's see if this other pen writes better. And then the big one, they use hearsay to convict you. And along the way, they indicted you, and that created a bid bond. They tried you, and that created a performance bond, and then they sentenced you, and that created the payment bond. And in the meantime, they created other investment bonds for the municipality and the courthouse and everything else, and they sold those out the back door of the courthouse under their ISIN number to the broker from Bear Stearns that stopped by at 5:30. And the biggest bank in town, the courthouse bank, because all courts are banks, all courts are post offices, all judges are bankers, and all judges are postmasters, and you can look that up in the legal dictionary. Okay? So on and on and on, this is what they use. As a conspiracy to deprive you of your rights, your God-given natural rights as a free man and woman of the United States of America, and through a private for-profit corporation called the White House Office, Inc., where the agent of service is Joseph R. Biden, with over 64,000 subsidiary corporations underneath its control, no different than Taco Bell.
acting and pretending to be government under the color of law, which is a fallacy, under 2 billion rules, codes, statutes, which you can't possibly obey them all. And if you do, you're obeying the will of the slave, the will of the master as a slave. And the best slaves are the ones who believe they are free. So they convince you that you own your own home, that you own your own car, that you own your own life and your own children, until the day comes where a CPS worker with a police officer without a warrant or any due process of law takes your very own property that came out of your bodies that you made, that's your gift from God, and they don't like the way you're managing them or taking care of them. Maybe they think they got somebody else who'll pay them a lot of money to do it for you. And they'll take them from you and run you through hoops for 18 to 24 months, terminate your parental rights. A guardian ad litem show up, another attorney. What is the legal definition of an attorney? An actor to a turn. The legal definition of an actor is somebody who gets up on stage and lies convincingly enough to make you believe in the character and the plot, and to a turn is to steal from one and turn over to another. They take your kids, and that guardian ad litem puts them into a foster home. Someone you don't even know. Yet ASPA and Title IV of the Social Security Act, which created the money that funded and established Child Protective Services in the first place, says they cannot take a child away from a parent without the parent's consent, unless the parent, through proper due process of law, has been tried and convicted of a felony. And once they've paid their price to society, they must be returned. And in the meantime, they must do their best to search for a family member to take the children. Well, that's all that's going on. And that their number one priority is to reunite the children with their parents. And that's what the two acts say. That's the intent of Congress that created it. Our legislature, which is we, the people's branch of government, is our legislators. That's our legislative branch, where we're supposed to take our grievances and remonstrance to. That's where we're supposed to go with it. And then they place them with a total stranger, and a lot of times maybe it's two gay guys, two lesbians. I've seen it happen 100 times. Don't get me wrong. I've seen it happen. Maybe it's from one religion to another. And they didn't like it being brought up in a certain religion's faith, so they put them in a Baptist faith or something different. Something different. I'm not condemning any religion. I fight for a religion. You can believe anybody you want to believe. Go to any church you want to church. Go. But when you take away children from one ethnicity, like our American Indian tribes in Oklahoma, this happens all the time. They'll take those beautiful Indian children and they'll place them in a white family somewhere. Do you know under the Nuremberg Code that's genocide? It's genocide to do that. It can destroy an entire race of people. Go ahead, honey.
18 U.S.C. 1091. If you look it up underneath the definitions of genocide, is taking children from one group of people and have them been raised by another group. 18 U.S. Code or USC 1091.
Yeah, and that's genocide too. Do you understand if someone forcibly puts anything into your body by any means, it's rape, even a needle? And how many employers are out there forcing their employees against their will? Look up the law. Hold them accountable. God says, come out of her, O ye Babylon. Babylon is the corporate construct. You'll see the city of Babylon in history was the very first city in the world to incorporate. Babylon's coming out of the corporate construct. That's all we deal with. We deal with federal government with a Dun & Bradstreet number. The name of our federal government today is the White House Office, Inc., under Joe R. Biden. It's not the United States of America. That's the government that lives within inside of each and every one of us. We, the people, are government. I read it to you. It's in every state constitution, in either Article 1, Section 1 or Article 1, Section 2, like Texas. In Texas, it's Article 1, Section 2. Okay? Read what it says. Know it. Go educate your public servants. Go educate your neighbors, your children, your grandchildren. Go educate everybody you can think of. By God, get out there and do seminars. If that's what you feel in your heart, you got to choose your place. You know, some people are just busy and they run businesses and they make plenty of money and they don't have time to do any of this stuff, but they can help financially. There are people that are good at doing paperwork, better on the computer than me. They can do websites, they can do articles, they can write books like Glenn did. Some people have good legal minds and they can go hold their public servants accountable in court. You can go to your city governments, you can go to your county meetings. You can stand up like they did in Utah County. In Utah County, 120 people walk into the city meeting up there, and each one of them, by law in that county, got 3 minutes to speak, and they lined up. And they took President Trump's Declaration of Independence, and each one read for 3 minutes and handed it to the next guy. And he read for 3 minutes and handed it to the next guy. And you know, I can read fast, and I've sat up here in these meetings, I've read that declaration. It takes me a good 20, 25 minutes to read quickly. And with all those different people switching spots and everything, it takes about an hour. And they take up an hour of the city meeting, and the city manager's got a date with his wife. He wants the hell out of there after an hour. It should have only lasted an hour. He's ready to go home, and the city didn't accomplish nothing. They didn't get any of their regular meeting functions done because the people were speaking. And you can pick any subject you want because they did that meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, went on for about 4 months. And then they started showing up demanding that the city unincorporate. And they did this in Southern Oregon, in every city in the 3 counties in Southern Oregon. And then they started to go to the county commissioners meeting, they did the same thing. And 1 county in Oregon listened to its people, unincorporated every city and the county and that, and started kicking the state to the curb. And they became a constitutional county, and 3 counties in Texas have done that. And 1 county in New York, of all places, has done that. There's 5 constitutional counties out of 3,144 counties in America now. There's only 3,144, guys. It's amazing what 150 people in each county can do. You just line them up. 3 minutes each. You line them up and you start demanding that they unincorporate. And when the Republic starts standing up, the state of stand down. And they'll start putting it in their rules of procedure. In the Texas Rules of Procedure, Section 53, I want you to read it. It says the Republic of Texas and the state of Texas. Why do they write them both in? Because they exist side by side. And the Republic of Texas is the de jure government of Texas, of its Texian people. And the state of is the de facto government of the Texan people. And if you don't believe me that those two are different, go back in history, start reading your history. Before I moved down here and after I moved down here, I studied Texas. In 1836, the Republic of Texas formed the Texas Rangers. And they created the first bond sale for $500,000. And that $500,000 was to run the Republic of Texas for 3 years. And the first $100,000 went to funding the Texas Rangers, with an additional $10,000 for horses and ammunition. And the Republic of Texas created the Texas Rangers. Not the state of. That didn't happen until 1874, after the Reconstruction era, when the state of corporation was formed by a couple of guys in Washington, D.C., without a vote of the people. And they sewed a gold fringe around your beautiful Texas flag, and they stole it. That's a captured flag. And the state of Texas Corporation, created under the rules of the District of Columbia during the Reconstruction era, took 31 republics in the United States and made 48 state ofs corporation, and redefined the boundaries of the state without a vote of the people and without an act of Congress. The only thing in the Reconstruction Act that doesn't say anything about having the authority to do that, and it doesn't say what they were going to do specifically. It just gave a president and a secretary the authority to create, well, New Mexico and Nevada, Idaho, Washington State, and others. And they just created it out of thin air with 2 signatures, without a vote of our legislature and without Congress and without your vote or your grandfather's votes. And they never got your permission. Yet they acknowledge that the Republic of Texas is formed by treaty with Mexico, and the treaty borders are clear in its description of its metes and bounds, and federal law says all property, and treaty law is supreme law, says all property shall be held by land patent through a grant deed and described in metes and bounds. Described in metes and bounds. I've destroyed warrants because
FBI agents have put an address on a piece of paper called a warrant, which they got offline, downloaded, printed, signed a judge's name to. She knew about it 3 weeks later. Got that in testimony. Texas sure does, but repeat it for the audience.
Yeah, in 1947, the United Nations, we became members of the United Nations, and they declared, we had to give them 50 miles of the southern border and Manhattan Island. So Texas, with its meets and bounds.
Yeah, it was actually 15 miles on each side of the border. It was 30 miles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but
We gave them 15 miles of Mexico.
unbelievable.
Is that okay with you Texans? That they give our land away?
You think the farmers down along the border know that? They believe that's their property. Yeah,
Another one, David, is the Republic of Texas also created Baylor University in Waco.
they did.
And I read an article on the Texas Supreme Court recently. They are claiming that they were founded in 1836. So that would mean that the Republic of Texas created the Texas Supreme Court.
That's right. They did. Every Supreme Court. Bonnie's kind of fun because I watch her create documents and tell Governor Abbott what to do, and Greg Paxton, which she's related to, by the way, in a long way back. I do her genealogy, and the people she's related to are pretty interesting.
Samuel Higley, the Remington family that made the firearms.
The guy who minted the very first coin in America in 1736 was her grandfather.
King Henry VIII, King John.
Yeah.
Like
Anyway,
royalty in Scotland. Who knew? David found it. I didn't.
You sure you didn't make that shit up?
no, I just got it off the internet.
Yeah, okay.
Just got it off the internet.
Because you,
Hey, David, you know what? It's 1:20. We should probably let them
shoot.
break for lunch. I hear some tummies.
I'd go till
grumbling.
midnight, you know.
I know. I hear their little tummies
All right.
growling.
Good. It's a good time.
all right, let's grip.
So we'll be back in an hour. So at 2:20, we'll be back in our seats to resume. Oh, wait. We have an announcement from Marcella, 7K Metals.
Hey guys, just a real quick housekeeping item. For those of you that enrolled in 7K, it is a two-step enrollment process. So you did fill out a card, but you have to check your email. The link that I sent you via email is from another member. It will say, it'll come from 7K Metals though. You have to finalize the enrollment, and I need you to do it before you come back from lunch. Otherwise, we're gonna just move forward with a different placement for you. And I've sent a text to each of the people that have not done that. So check your phone. Maybe the email's just, I don't have it correctly. So you should have received, everybody should have received the link by now. Okay, thanks.
All right, see you guys in an hour. There's some good barbecue out there.